Welcome to another episode of the Reboot Chronicles, a no-holds-barred forum with global leaders, authors, entrepreneurs, and CEOs about how organizations stay focused on growth and innovation in unprecedented times. I'm your host, Dean DeVias, coming to you live from Reviv's North American headquarters in Chicago, and we would like to thank you for joining us from around the globe today. The gig economy is hotter than ever, and nearly half of us participate in it around the world. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, 36% of the U.S. workforce are gig workers. But as you all know, our government's data is usually a little late. Globally, for instance, nearly half of the workforce, almost 1.6 billion people, are independent workers. That's an interesting stat. So to unpack this emerging movement, we invited ex-Lyft and Uber leader Allen Narcisse to the Reboot Chronicles. He is the founder and CEO of Gigs, which is revolutionizing the dynamics of job seeker-employer interactions, pretty much by simplifying the matching process. The focus on connecting 86 million blue-collar workers with thousands of employers in local communities across the U.S. Allen, it's good to see you.
Thank you for inviting me here. Glad to spend time with you.
Yeah, we're pretty big on the gig economy here, working on some thought leadership around it, of course. And it's good to see someone actually take up the charge. You know, a lot of recruiting sites out there, but what was the genesis of Gigs? How did this come about?
It's been a long arc for me. My first startup, eByline, focused in on connecting freelance journalists with publishers. I got to learn a lot about the pain points of earning and the pain points of flexibility. After that, I spent the next 6 years in rideshare. So I've spent a lot of time with drivers at Uber when I was leading Uber Eats, the same at Lyft. I heard about the inconsistency of earnings, the challenges of being a rideshare driver, the challenges of balancing a full-time job and a gig job at the same time. And then I worked at a tech staffing company called WorkRise that focused in on oil and gas. And there was just a bunch of insights with working with the workers, hearing their stories, that led me to believe that there need to be a better solution to find jobs, more transparent, more focused on the specific needs of the blue-collar worker. And then that accumulation really led to the launch of Gigs.
Yeah, sounds like you did your own user experience design project there to kick it off. That's good. You've got decent funding, good backers, some great momentum, no shortage of competition. How do people think about you comparing it to Indeed and even LinkedIn, who most corporations are using these days?
The major job boards now focus in on every single job. And I think that one of the most interesting insights at the very beginning of Gigs is that most job boards don't have the location and the accurate pay for jobs. Now, if you're an accountant, the exact address of a location doesn't really matter that much.
Right.
You can negotiate your pay range. But if you're an hourly worker, 25 cents and the location of the job matters quite a bit. And one of the first things that we noticed is that 80% of the jobs on major job boards didn't have that information for job seekers. That really gave us confidence that the big insights and really empathizing with that blue collar job seeker wasn't happening at scale. And so when we think about baristas, delivery drivers, grocery store workers, warehouse workers, their basic needs for information about jobs wasn't being satisfied. So that's where we came in. The first thing we did was map the entire United States in terms of neighborhoods. And if you look at Gigs, we show the neighborhood of every single job. We show a pay range. When we have the data, we show if tips are available for that job. We show that if it's a commission-based job. We make the requirements extremely clear, how much experience is needed. And we just cut that out of the job description so the job seeker can be informed and engaged. There's no job board out there that really satisfies the needs of that blue collar worker and just cuts to the chase of what they need to know.
Yeah, it sounds like the specificity of the job spec, the pay down to the cents, and also hyper-local targeting are maybe missing in a lot of these. Yeah, it's a good point because a lot of the gigsters out there are work from wherever, and it's a totally different game. And then you've got the corporate person on demand, you know, the fractional C-suite and all this other stuff going on. So this is very different from that, which is good. Is there in terms of your target audience, did I throw out the right number? Are there like 80 million, 86 million blue collar workers in the United States?
Well, there's 144 million workers in the United States. There's about 60 million that work just in full-time or part-time service jobs, blue collar jobs. There's an additional 23 million unique gig workers. Most gig workers have full-time jobs. When I worked at Lyft, one thing that we cited is that 80% of the Lyft drivers also had full-time jobs. And that's just a reality of the economy that's driven by what we're seeing in terms of inflation. It's also driven by what we're seeing in terms of inconsistent hours that job seekers face. So if you work at a major big box retailer, you might have 28 hours one week, 40 hours the next week, 16 hours the next week. The American worker has to fill those hours because their rent, their car payments, their childcare, those are consistent costs. And so when we talk about 80 plus million workers, we're talking about blue collar workers that have to take on a second job or a gig job to make ends meet.
Yeah, most of the Uber drivers I know, Uber, Lyft, whatever, including my son, they do have another gig or two. But you're saying full-time employees actually have let's just call it a real job with benefits, are also doing side gig stuff, which I have validated in a lot of the work that I do. You see that trend going up and to the right?
Absolutely. Right. So as inflation increases, I think that a lot of big box companies are actually fragmenting workers even more. And so absolutely. And we're seeing spin from gig companies as these companies grow, the Ubers, the Lyfts, the DoorDashes, it's actually increasing year over year as they add more drivers.
Yep.
So the flexibility of the gig economy is really attractive. The choice, the ability to earn whenever you want is really attractive as a coupling to the full-time or part-time job that a lot of the everyday workers that we see have. So yeah, absolutely. We're betting on this continuing, and we're betting on ourselves to be that platform where you can find any type of working opportunity, including that gig opportunity that you need week to week or month to month.
Different tangent here. One of the recent panels you run, I think one of the people said that the gig economy is a scam. And why is that? Why? I mean, do you agree with that?
Well, I think the point he was making is that the earnings, the cost that you have, the risk that you have as a driver isn't really clear. Now, the person who said that is a very experienced driver.
Yeah.
I agree, and our team agrees with the point of making every job transparent. So how much you can earn, how hard it is to actually get that job, and then more information about the costs. That could be in terms of taxes. That can be in terms of just the cost of running your own business. But philosophically, we believe in that transparency idea. And then we want to have every job out there where the job seeker can actually choose based on their needs, their flexibility, where they live, whether or not you even have a car or not, or a bike, or where you live in the city and where you have access to transportation.
Yep.
So our goal is to have every one of those blue collar or service or gig jobs. And then we want to empower the job seeker to make the choice that fits their life in the most possible effective, flexible way that they need.
Yeah, and I think the comment was more about how Lyft and Uber are maximizing their profitability, and the gigsters are getting less and less. So different topic, but it does point to how does this sector continue to thrive and be attractive to people, and quite frankly, why it even interested you in the first place. So it seems to me it's all about growth. It's not going away. Almost half of the global population is will soon be in these type of independent roles. So when you look at that going up and to the right, it's good for your business, but is it going to change your business model at all? Or right now you're employer paid, so it's free to everybody listening to go on and search for local gigs in their zip code or hyper zip code. But how do you think business models and changes and innovation and what's going to happen next are going to affect your business?
So on the job seeker side, we want to be freely available. When you come on our app, we want you to be able to search. We want to empower you. For now, asking a job seeker to pay lessens the impact of what we're trying to do.
Right.
We want you to be informed about every possible job, every opportunity. Now, on the employer side, we're still evolving. And ultimately, I believe that employers want, whether you're a gig platform or a coffee shop or a grocery store or a restaurant, you want the most qualified worker.
Right.
You want enough workers to fill the business's need. So let's say that you're a retailer with a seasonal spike. You're expecting a large November and December. you need enough workers to make that work. And you ultimately want the lowest cost, right? You're worried about your P&L. And so it's really important for you to be able to fill those roles at the lowest possible cost. And so our business model is going to evolve to satisfy all those. And I think the company that's going to lead the space in the future is going to have the best triangulation of those three concepts: best quality, fills volume, and then lowest cost.
Yep.
And so when we think about our business model, we think about the business model that works best for the employer to satisfy all three of those. Right now, we charge employers on a per applicant basis. And the reason for that is that it's very transparent for the employer. Each applicant they get in on a performance basis, they understand how much it's costing. They can play that out over a month or a quarter to understand how much that's going to cost for them to source their company or source the open roles that they have. And so it's just clear for them and it's simple. But that doesn't mean that our business model won't evolve and improve over time for the sake of employers.
And when you look at the direction of the types of people, I'm hearing a lot of unskilled workers come to the platform, which is good. Some skilled, but when you look at things like, hairstylists, dental hygienists, whatever, trying to think of other ones versus someone working in a car wash. Do you see that skewing to a bigger piece of your business? My guess is it's smaller because that network typically, they know where to look, right? There's only so many salons or so many doctor's offices versus the broad base, I need anything type of searcher.
Right. Right now, we're focused on entry level to, I would say, emerging manager, 1 to 3 years of experience. Maybe you've worked in a restaurant for a couple of years or worked in a grocery store for a couple of years.
Yep.
But those managerial roles or those more credentialed roles are really highly in demand. And the business side is always looking to find that kind of person. What's also beneficial about those jobs for the job seekers is that they're higher paying, they're more stable, they're more hours because they're more in demand. And so we see our arc as providing longer term career opportunities for job seekers over time too. They don't want to be stuck in these gig cycles, 28 hours a week cycles that don't lead to more wage growth. So our evolution over time will certainly include more credentialed roles. And we actually want to empower job seekers to escape the repetition of the cycle they're in now. And certainly the electrician job, the plumber job, the trade job, the hairstylist job, nursing assistants, physician's assistants jobs. The economy is going to need more and more of those jobs. There's fewer people going to college also. And so we want to be at that nexus where we start by helping you get a job today, but we also help you find an opportunity tomorrow that's going to fit and improve your life.
Did you say fear of people going to college? What does that mean?
No, I just mean there's fewer people going to college,
right?
So the cost of college is, so the cost of college is higher.
Yeah.
It's really expensive taking on debt.
Yep.
Colleges are more competitive. You can earn more without, if you pick the right trade, you can earn more without the debt, right? So that's just a decision that more and more high school graduates are making. And we want to be there for them to empower that choice of whether they want to be in a trade or work in an hourly job, and just make it as simple as looking on Instagram to find a job and to be empowered to make that choice.
Yeah, maybe we just invented a new term, FOC, fear of college, or do you see yourself getting more involved in the educational ecosystem? For instance, a lot of people I know with kids would be better off. The kids might be better off going to trade schools and community colleges and getting that quick certification or whatever it is that they want to do, and getting into the labor force sooner rather than later.
Certainly. So a skilled electrician, a carpenter, there's not enough of those types of roles. And we can expand. There's a lot of roles that are credentialed, certified, that the economy is going to need, that are high paying jobs, that are great jobs. If we're going to build buildings in the future or houses, or have people that we can trust in certain roles, we need more workers like that in the future.
Yeah.
So the economy needs it. It's beneficial for workers. It's beneficial for businesses. When we think about the labor force and the things that we're doing at Gigs, I'll just take an example. Let's say that we're talking about food delivery. Food delivery just doesn't just affect the delivery driver. It affects the big company that's the marketplace. It also affects the restaurant as well. I think that's an understated piece of the triangle. When food delivery expands, it's making restaurants more viable, and they're connecting with new customers.
Right.
So the same thing, that's an analogy for how we think about the labor force, meaning this is sort of a net good in the sense of if matching happens better, then the economy works better. If there's people moving up to better roles, that's good for everyone. And so that's really the philosophy and underlying idea behind gigs, is to make liquidity in terms of the marketplace of labor a lot more effective than it is today. And that's certainly not happening through incumbents. There's a lot of incumbent businesses using major job boards, but they're frustrated with the ability to match and find people, which is why they're coming to gigs and why we exist and why we're growing.
Right. What kind of advice would you give people looking for gig jobs? Maybe they weren't, but now they listen to us. Maybe they want to.
Compare. There's a lot of gig companies out there. There's obviously the major ones that we all use every day, but there's other ones. And my thought on gig jobs is that there's a potential fit for everyone. If you like walking dogs, if you like taking care of kids, if you want to be by yourself and not have a passenger in the back of your car, and food delivery or returns or package delivery could be for you. There's many more options than I think the average gig worker is aware of. That's one of the things that we want to help gig workers accomplish, or full-time workers looking for gig jobs, is to understand all the choices in their community and then make the choice there. It's not just pay, it's also what you're doing and the flexibility and the demand that platform's bringing to you. So all those things are choices you can make. Certainly you can sign up for a major platform that we've heard of, but there's other choices out there that might be a better fit or a better experience for you.
Yeah. And when everyone thinks of gigsters, they think of, the oligopolies that are kind of controlling things. Let's look out 5-10 years, as this kind of becomes a more systemic part of the labor force or the ecosystems of the job forces. What other kind of roles do you envision might start emerging?
There's actually manufacturing, event jobs, warehousing jobs that are becoming more fragmented, meaning you can make slightly more for filling a specific shift. And so I may mention that before. We see traditional industries being gigified and looking at the Ubers and Lyfts and saying, oh, well, we have shifts that we need to fill. We have call outs. We have issues that we need to fill in terms of our customers. Maybe this model of staffing is beneficial. And so if you're an actor or you need to fill extra hours, maybe these are good options for you. I still think the North Star for a worker is a successful full-time job where you can grow, where you can be promoted. But in the short term, it might not just be delivering a package or delivering food or delivering a rider. It might be walking a dog. It might be working in a seasonal role that's shift-based. So I think that we'll see more and more of these and more apps that provide a wide variety of these types of options for workers.
We had H&R Block on the program a few weeks ago, and he basically has a huge multi-billion-dollar company. He's been through a lot of fits and starts over the decades, but they basically have 60,000 gig workers who they have to cycle on and off their platform because they don't employ them all year round, and they seem to have perfected that. So these high knowledge jobs they've always been that way with them, but do you see that being a trend in other businesses?
Well, yeah, it's smart for a business to understand their fundamental seasonality. And then this is something we were actually talking about internally. It is the business of the company to understand how to staff. That's as important as serving the customer because those workers serve the customer. If you're H&R Block, that tax consultant, that tax advisor is the business. And so it's incumbent on the business to understand how to staff, how to find talent, how to reduce their costs, how to be tied into quality. That's the same problem that an Uber faces every day. That's the same problem that a Target or a Home Depot will face in October through December.
Exactly.
And so it's as important as understanding the fundamentals. Is like how am I gonna satisfy the customer through labor? Certainly, and that might be a wide variety of different things, as I mentioned before. It could be the use of your car or the use of your talent. in ways that are going to be easier to do over time.
Yeah. Now you brought up retail too. We had the CEO of JCPenney on right before Black Friday a while back, and they're really good at that surging of employment and then surging up and surging down. But do you see the big dogs of retail using you as well?
We certainly can support them. So we tap into any community. We tap into job seekers that want local jobs. And we can showcase those job seekers' skills and capabilities in ways that other job boards can't. So we're excited to take on big box retailers. We're excited to support gig companies. As I said in the beginning, any blue collar job or any entry level job, that's really our sweet spot. And that's what our application, our service is really designed for, the employer side as well as the job seeker side.
Yeah, I was going with two things: speed and scale. It's like, how do you get 1,000 people fast? It's like I probably couldn't scale that up myself, and a lot of these into big groups that do. My guess is they could probably perfect it a little better with a platform out there. Any other advice you'd give either potential gigsters or companies looking forward in the next few years?
Yeah, so I think that on the company side, one thing is important is understanding the applicant and the applicant mindset. So I think that a lot of job posts rely on their traditional long job description, or maybe not the right information that a job seeker is looking for. We did one of the first things we did when starting the company is talk to Gen Z job seekers, and one of the first callouts they said is we don't like traditional job descriptions. We don't want to read them. They don't say what we need to know. They're not really informative.
We don't want to do them.
And so,
we want to. Yeah.
well, there's a lot of Gen Z job seekers in gig jobs. And there's more people working in summer jobs. There's more people working while they're in high school and in college. So like the reality is that the Gen Z worker is engaged and they have new needs that are emerging. And that's really the future that's coming, whether companies are ready for it or not. And so one thing we've tried to jump ahead of is saying like, well, let's make the requirements extremely clear. Let's make this as concise and as informative and as transparent. There's a lot of cues that you might see on a travel site that should actually come to the employment world in terms of job standardization. What languages do you need to speak? Does this include tips? Is it remote? What's the interview process? Let's make you successful and say, what are tips that you'll need to be successful in this job?
Right.
So let's just cut to the chase. And one thing I'm seeing is that Gen Z job seekers are demanding this and expecting this. It might be because of the apps they use. It might be just because of their whole experience with the world. But we're skating to the puck in terms of designing an app that really informs and prepares a job seeker. And that's something that I think employers and us can partner on, is making the best experience to help a job seeker or an applicant understand what it's going to be like to work in their company and actually what's important about them and the role itself to make a good match.
Yeah, while you were answering that, I just went to a couple job sites, not yours. And yeah, these job descriptions are long and boring, but there are also a lot of cut and paste going on, a bunch of just nebulous stuff that is supposed to make people look good. But have you had a lot of gig roles in your life yourself?
Well, when I worked at Uber and Lyft, I drove. That was a really important aspect. My first employed job, real job,
Yeah.
was working at a Southern Polytechnic University. I had a data entry job where I would enter FAFSA data, and that's actually one of the origin stories of gigs. Is I didn't have a car, and I lived in Atlanta, and the way the transit system works in Atlanta is I lived basically 25 minutes from this campus, but I had to take a bus to a train into the city, and then another bus out of the city to this campus. So my one-way commute was about an hour and a half. I looked this up recently. It's still an hour and a half one way. So I would get up 5 a.m. to get to work on time. I would get home in the dark also. And that was for a college time job. Imagine having kids. Imagine having real responsibilities. Right now, there's about 6 million American workers without cars that face that reality every single day. And so that's one of the reasons that neighborhood data and transparency was so important. I could see us evolving to even including commute data. And so there's 6 million job seekers. There's about 10 million live opportunities right now. You should pick the one that works the best, and you should get your time back, and you should maximize your earnings. And so, yeah, that's really part of the DNA of our story.
Yep.
Is that initial experience of being on that bus every day during that summer.
Yeah, I just thought of a good added application on your site. It could be what's the ROI of this position based on where you live and how you move around, and you can actually calculate people's net. Yeah, the actual gross, but the net. Here's your net after taxes. Here's your net after commuting. That could be really helpful for people because they don't have time to understand that. Speaking of that,
That's right, and to put into real terms, exactly, real earning terms.
Yeah. I can. I'll send you some code after this. You can plug it in with AI.
ChatGPT.
It shouldn't be that. It shouldn't be that hard. I'm not going to ask you about AI because every CEO is scrambling to tell everyone that they're using it. But I know you probably built your company using a couple layers of that. I think we're more interested in your story now, which is how have you rebooted yourself? You've had a very eclectic career.
Every job I've had, I've restarted in a major way. So my first professional job after college was as a consultant. And then after business school, I worked at the LA Times. There's a whole universe to learn about working at a newspaper. And then I worked at a movie studio. And then I was an entrepreneur. And then I worked in food delivery. Never thought I would work in food delivery or in food in my entire career. Learned quickly how restaurants work and how they think. Then I worked in rideshare where I had to learn a lot more about government policy. And then I worked in oil and gas. And so every job I've had to be great at learning. And I would give, I think there's 2 things in my past that have really worked to help me do that. One, I moved every year as a kid. New elementary school, new junior high, new high school. And so when you move a lot, you have to understand how to pick up academics. You have to make new friends. That's really something you do a lot. And then as a consultant, when I would go into a new client, I would learn how to ask questions and understand what was important quickly. And in my 3rd year as a consultant, I maybe had 50 clients. And so I got great at asking questions and learning. And I think that those lessons really apply to my transitions and how I think about being a startup founder today.
Yeah. What's been the biggest thing you struggled with? I mean, didn't you work at a newspaper for a while?
I worked at the LA Times. You mean in terms of transitions?
Yeah, whatever. It's good you got out of newspapers. I know the LA Times well, and Chicago Tribune, same company. Yeah, that probably a good place to maybe learn how not to run a business.
Yeah, well, I still subscribe. I still believe in the fourth estate. I love the mission, and I still think the mission.
Do you get paper?
I get the LA Times and New York Times every Sunday.
Yeah,
and my wife and I reread it. Yeah. And I'm still grateful to understand what's happening in the world, a world away from a journalist. I still think it's fantastic. Yeah, just in terms of struggles, I think there's no book that explains the shortcut of what's really important. And I remember working at Paramount. I might even have this book still. I'm sure I have this book behind me. There was a fantastic book on motion picture economics that explained how actors were paid, how movies were greenlit, how the economics of it, we called it a waterfall at Paramount, how the economics trickle in through DVD and streaming and Italian television licensing. Most of the transitions I made, there hasn't been that book that just explains how the business works. And it takes time to listen to the experts and listen to your managers and ask questions. That's been the biggest issue is not knowing what you don't know and having to make decisions quickly during these transitions. When I was at the Times, I had my first big management role where I led a 30-person team. In fact, I led a Spanish language division without being able to speak Spanish. And I would say that was one really interesting transition. When I worked at the Uber Eats, I led a team of 80, right? And when I went to Lyft, I led a team of 300. And so as these teams scaled, you have to learn even more quickly, and you have to learn from your team what their day-to-day challenges are in an effective way without having too many judgments. And so I think that's really it, right? There's no book. And then as you scale the leadership that you have, you're really depending on your team to build trust quickly. so you can understand the best way to help those teams. That's really, as I reflect, I think the biggest lesson I've had. And I wish I'd known that before, as I took on bigger and bigger teams quickly. I would have spent more time in the field, more time with the customer, and then really focused in on the best way to serve the customer. That's really the ethos of our values at Gigs is the customer has all the answers. Spend time with them and learn from them as much as possible.
Great stories. Great advice. Thanks for joining us, Alan. Really appreciate it.
I appreciate the opportunity. I really appreciate the conversation.
Yeah,
thank you.
Sounds good. You've been listening to Allen Narcisse, who is the CEO of Gigs. Check it out. It's good company for those of you looking for your next gig. This is Dean Tobias with the Reboot Chronicles. I want to thank you for joining us today. We'll see you soon.